keeping our eyes on the electoral process, but with specific focus on the bimodal voter accreditation system, that tool deployed for Nigeria's exercise, particularly since the gradual transition to electronic transmission of results and exit from the manual process of results management in our electoral exercise. So joining us today to look at the functionality of the BVAS, what it is able to do, what it was able to do, and you'll understand that in a few moments, what it was able to do in certain elections as against what it is currently doing now. And our guest is going to illustrate that for you. So joining us for this particular segment is Mr. Soala Jumbo, a legal practitioner and former vice chairman, Nigeria Bar Association, Bayelsa chapter. Good morning and welcome to the program, Mr. Jumbo.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So first things first, for those who are unable who don't know what the functionality of the BVAS is, and for just the benefit of a recap, take us through the three-pronged function of the bimodal voter accreditation system.
All right. So the BVAS has basically three functions, two of which are quite popular and most people know. The first of this function is the ability of the BVAS to be used for accreditation at the polling units on the election day. That is to say, when you go with your voter's card, it's captured or your face is captured, and then if your name is in the register, you are accredited by the BVAS machine. That's the first function. The second function is that at the end of the election, at each polling unit, the BVAS machine is used by the presiding officer to take a photograph, a snapshot of the results sheet from that polling unit, which is then uploaded to the INEC result viewing portal, which is popularly called IREV. That's the second function of the BVAS. Now, those two functions, I think, are known by everybody. Now, but there's a third function that is not so well known, which is the ability of the BVAS machine to also upload to IREV the figure, the accreditation figure from each polling unit on the election day. So that is to say that everybody who was accredited in a polling unit whose card or face was captured, that the total number on that day can be sent to IREV, and it's also visible to the public. So what that does is that the public is able to see the accreditation figure from the polling unit side by side with the result sheet from the polling unit. And therefore, if there is any anomaly, it's immediately visible to the public. Yes, so on the screenshot we are sharing now, you can see how that function works. In those green boxes, you can see a figure. Now, the figure in the green box, which is currently showing on screen, is the accreditation figure from the polling unit. The name of the polling unit is at the top of the green box, and then it's showing you this number of people who are accredited at so time, so it gives in real time at 2 p.m., at 4 p.m., this is the number of people accredited. So at the end of the election, it's uploaded to IREV, and then you can see. Now, beside the green box, you can see a button there saying view results. Now, if you click on that button, on that icon, it will then take you to the actual results sheet where you see the results from that polling unit. You can then immediately tell if there's any foul play, because if, for instance, the green box is saying 45 people were accredited, and then on the results sheet, you're seeing votes of 1,000 people, you immediately know that there was something wrong with the results from that polling unit. Now, by the Electoral Act, INEC is supposed to use the BVAS accreditation figure in collation so that before every polling unit result is collated, you compare it with that figure that is showing in the green box to see if it tallies or if it matches. If it doesn't match, then there's some reconciliation to be done. That result should not be used. It should be stepped down and reconciled. But if it matches, then that result is supposed to be collated. That's the way the system is supposed to work. But what we've seen is that during the Bielsa elections and then after the Bielsa elections, this system of transmitting the BVAS figure directly to the IREV has been discontinued, and we do not know if it's going to be reinstated in the Ondo elections.
All right, Mr. Swala. So we can also help the audience contextualize this properly. So what you're saying, which some of us are familiar with, is that rather than just knowing how many people were accredited, exclusively being known to INEC on the BVAS, or what is written on the Form EC8A, which we can all view, usually the way they design the BVAS, electronically it's supposed to publish the number of figures of the accredited voters. So as you open, you can see 210 people were accredited. So when you open when you view it now, you can now check on your EC8A to say, okay, is it 210 people? If it's not, it doesn't match, then there's a problem. But INEC is saying that because YAGA Africa and the rest of civil society organization, they advocated for this. This engenders, what do you call it now, transparency. Although the law says, I mean, the Supreme Court law judgment says the IREV is just a viewing portal, not a collation center, if you will. But we're discussing this because of transparency and confidence building process. Now, INEC, I just want you to respond to INEC's explanation from what we got, is that if you click on it, you see that they'll write accredited voters, then the number they'll now write, please note that accreditation figures may not be final until synchronization is completed from the devices used in this location. So INEC's argument, without defending INEC's argument was that because of synchronization issue and the trust quotient and all of that, so that it doesn't look like there is somebody playing games around, they disabled it. Did you hear that as well from your research and your findings? And is it tenable by your understanding?
No, very, very clearly, that's not tenable at all. And the reason I say so is this. Now, if you look at some of those clips you were showing, you will see that it not only reports the accreditation figure from the polling units, it reports the time that figure was transmitted. So if it's saying that, for instance, this figure was transmitted at 5 p.m., what further synchronization do you want to do? It was synchronized at 5 p.m. That's after the election time. Now, let's imagine that it even says 8 p.m., right? Or 11 p.m. We can clearly tell that the election is over by that time. So there's no further synchronization to be done. Now, even for the ones that were synchronized earlier, because you see in some polling units, you don't even have as much as 20 voters, and so they conclude the elections very quickly. And therefore, the presiding officer can upload to IREV and early, even though ordinarily they should wait for the election time to be over. But what we found is that these these figures from the BVAS are consistent with what is in the BVAS report, which INEC produced after the elections. So, for instance, those figures you're looking at were from the Bielsa elections. If you take the BVAS report that was produced by INEC after the elections, you will see almost 100% consistency between that BVAS report and these figures. So that note there, which is something like a disclaimer, is just basically, a prudent thing to do. But that doesn't, say that those figures are incorrect. Yes, it is true that synchronization can be done stage by stage, but the presiding officers are trained to only upload those figures after the elections have concluded at the polling units.
So, Mr. Swala, just a follow-up on that. So what do you suspect is going on here?
Well, we can only guess. I think INEC is best placed to throw some light on the reason why they discontinued the process. And we must commend INEC because they also brought about this process. They were not prodded, but the reason why they have discontinued it now is what we need to understand, because it's a very current process. It's a very wonderful feature of the BVAS machine, and it brings, transparency, just like you said. It adds credibility to the election process, so that even though the IREV is not a collation center, the public can follow what INEC is doing during the elections, and that adds to the credibility of the whole process. So if you have that system, you introduce that feature, which is very good and very commendable, then why do you on your own now disable that feature? That's the question I think only INEC can answer. I cannot speculate. I cannot say it's for any nefarious reason or intention, but I think that INEC is in a better position to answer that question.
Just to prove that, perhaps we can, do a display of the INEC website right now, so that Nigerians can see that indeed that third functionality of the BVAS has been disabled, has been discontinued, using your words. But even in that video that you recorded prior to the disabling of that third functionality of the BVAS, there were some discrepancies to the effect that number of accredited voters as seen in that green box was different from the number of accredited voters as put out in the results sheet uploaded. Now, in that case, where the number of accredited voters does not tally with the same captured on the results sheet, what could have happened, Mr. Jumbo, so that people can understand?
Now, what happened is that some players in the electoral process, I wouldn't want to mention the names of parties or this thing, but some operatives compromised the system. That's clearly what happened. And some of these things are factual because they've been adjudicated. The Bielsa election petition cycle is over. The courts looked into, what happened. And it's quite clear, on the records of the court that the system was compromised. INEC themselves admitted to the fact that the system was compromised, not by themselves, but by third parties, so to say. So that's clearly what happened. You cannot have a situation where the BVAS machine is saying 45 people were accredited, and then you have 1,090-something votes on the result sheet. Clearly, something went wrong. So the process must have begun properly, in which case people were being accredited, and then at some point in the system, some third parties or some political operatives must have taken over the system. Now, there was also the allegation from INEC that, the BVAS machines themselves were compromised in the sense that, a flash drive was introduced into some of the BVAS machines to even change the figures in the BVAS machines. But luckily, as with electronic devices, there was a kind of fail-safe mechanism so that when that happened, it shut down some of those BVAS machines and they were not able to transmit to IREV. So the answer to the question is that a lot of what happened is already in the public space. And if you go and look at, for instance, the Bielsa election petition records, you would see that these things have been adjudicated by the courts, that there was manipulation of results, there was forgery, there was, all kinds of shenanigans, as they say, took place on that day. And what this mechanism, this feature of the BVAS machine does, like I always say, is that it acts like a CCTV camera, which captures the crime. It can't stop the crime, but it captures it in plain sight. And so the human players who man the system should then take the CCTV camera, see what happens, and then make the right decisions based on what they see on that camera, which is the BVAS machine.
All right, Mr. Jumbo, just as we begin to wind down, that feature is quite important, and I think I will be one of those that will be advocating that it should be restored as far as transparency is concerned. As much as it's not a polling unit, but at least it helps us to see and watch what is going on as far as INEC is concerned. But not speaking for INEC, but accepting without conceding, if they give technology, network, and all of this as an excuse, what would you propose?
Sorry? Say again?
I say, if they give examples of technology in terms of network coverage, because of synchronization issues, what would you propose? Because we need that feature back. Some politicians may not want that feature back, so we know. But for every good intended person who wants Nigeria to work and our electoral system to be better, and so that our electoral jurisprudence can be smoother, everybody should advocate for this. So what do we do if coverage of network is a problem?
No, there's no problem with network. There's no problem with technology. It's perfect. The technology is almost perfect, almost perfect. In fact, I say that the system here in Nigeria is even better than what you find in some of the first world countries, even the United States of America. The system, the technology is almost perfect. Now, the BVAS machine doesn't even rely on very serious internet technology. It even uses the normal GSM networks. And then even if it's not able to transmit at the polling unit, once you leave the area and you get to any area where there is a telecommunications network, it transmits. And so there's no, I don't foresee any serious problem, except, there's some intentionality in making sure that the technology doesn't work. I think that the technology is well placed, to deliver credible elections. So if INEC takes that step to reinstate this feature and this technology, I don't see any thing with synchronization, any issues with that at all. The problem with this is that this system, not using this system, has now allowed, a sort of style, so to say, of rigging elections, where elections in, a huge part of the states go on credibly and transparently, but then in some few parts of the state, the system is then compromised with all these huge figures that then make nonsense of the credible elections in the other parts of the state, because where you're getting 45 votes per polling unit in other parts of the state, you then begin to get 1,000 votes per polling unit in some other parts of the state. And therefore, the will of the voters, is compromised. So I think INEC can reinstate this feature without any issues whatsoever.
All right, there's more to ask about this functionality, but we must end the conversation at this point. And thank you for coming on the show to draw our attention to this. And it is responsible citizen journalism. And of course, we'll continue to ask these questions of the electoral umpire. Mr. Suala Jumbo. Yes, Mr. Suala Jumbo is a legal practitioner and former vice chairman, Nigeria Bar Association, Bayelsa State Chapter.